We're going to be looking at water lines, health, all this sort of stuff. Sally's question is, why is water regarded as negatively if you happen to be living a lot above an underground watercourse? Why is it? Is it always detrimental? And if so, why? Can it ever be a positive asset? What if you're lucky enough to have a stream in your garden? Could this actually be detrimental too? Supposing it starts as an underground watercourse that runs between or beneath your house and then emerges in the garden as a beautiful bubbling stream. How can it be detrimental in one state and then positive in the other? She finishes with, or am I just reading too much into this? Well, no, she's not really reading too much into it. It's a very good question, really. How is water detrimental? Some time ago, crossing water lines were pretty well established in Germany to be detrimental. They were found to be cause of all sorts of illness could be associated with crossing water lines. If you've got a house and you've got a crossing, we'll just make it as simple as possible, okay? So, and you've got a crossing point, and let's say that a bed for a person is sleeping above that crossing point. In the nature of the uniqueness of each of us, so the uniqueness of each individual being, that crossing point is not going to be detrimental for every single person that might possibly sleep in that position. So let's say that house is there for 100 years. Let's say it gets sold every 10 years. So let's say there's 10 people that use that particular room as a place to sleep and they put their bed in the same place. So you've got 10 people being potentially affected by the energy field, the electromagnetic energy field of the water line that is crossing beneath. One of them might be affected out of the 10 detrimentally, and one of them might be affected in that one person might be affected in all sorts of different ways. There are loads of different ways that people can be affected detrimentally, from just simply not sleeping very well to, again, as we just had said just now, to the most chronic of illnesses, which could be life-threatening, which could be cancer. There might be a similarity, there might be a connection between sleeping over crossing water lines and a serious illness like cancer. Can't say 100% for sure. And again, that indication will be reflected in your own individual reality as to whether that be the case or not. But let's say you got one person there. So what happens there? What happens to the other 9 people? Well, in that case, it's not a detrimental water crossing point, is it? Because for them, it doesn't affect them. So water, we can't say that water simply is detrimental per se. We cannot say that. And don't forget that we have to look, when we're dealing with dowsing and working in the subtle energies, we have to look at everything as being from the perspective of the individual. So it's not like saying that we're looking from it's not like saying that we're looking at objectively at the outside world, so that those 10 people are all going to be affected in the same way. What we actually do is we look at the perspective of the individual and look at their world, their world, right? Their world. So if I was unlucky enough to be that individual that was affected by the water crossing point, then we would be looking in my world at what goes on, what else is going on in my world, where is this sort of illness that might be manifesting from this as part of its contributing factor, where else does it manifest in that person's world, in that person's life? Water flow, water in terms of healing represents flow and healing, and it is generally considered to be a positive aspect to reality. So can sleeping over water lines be bad for us? And the answer is yes, it can. It can be revealed as part of the picture of a person's world when they're suffering from an illness. What we think is the main issue with water, underground water. Now think about underground water, right? So if you've got house, land, people often think you've got streams flowing everywhere, and you've got basins, underground basins of water, and that's what you're aiming at. Well, it's not really true, because most water that is in the ground is simply trickling in various concentrations of trickleness, like water passing through a sponge. So it's all sort of gently trickling downwards, but it's well, this is surface water. Obviously, water from rain is permeating through, but then there's water that is within the earth, you know, quite deep within the earth, that actually flows around. But the water that comes down as surface water and trickles down through the ground, basically the ground is like a sponge. So any house is likely to have some kind of water influence upon the owners of the people living in the house. When you're dowsing for water in your own homes, for example, okay, if you're dowsing for detrimental water, don't forget to ask that you're looking for a detrimental. Is there a detrimental water line affecting this room, or is there a detrimental water line affecting this house, right? That would be the first one to ask. And then you say, okay, well, which room is it in? Is it in the living room? Is it in the kitchen? Is it in the you know, is it affecting the bedroom? Is it just affecting the garage? Maybe, I don't know, whatever you want to ask. But if you're looking for the detrimental water line, you ask specifically for the detrimental water line. If you get a yes on that first question of is there a detrimental water line in this house, affecting this house, or affecting us in this house, then you want to ask how many are there, because it might be more than one. And obviously, if you've got a crossing point, you've got two at least. If you've got three, you've got a magnified impact from that line. So just think about the dowsing process and the dowsing questions that you're going to ask. But what we think it is that affects it and makes it detrimental is that as the water trickles down and gets kind of compressed by the rock, which it will do, and there's small little movements of the earth is moving all the time, and there's little, you know, there's this movement of rock on rock can create what they call the piezoelectric effect. And what they think is that actually this sort of pressure on the water trickling through is changing the ionization of the water. So let me get this right. They think that elevated negative air ion levels, so in other words, once this field of energy comes up from the ground into the air, into the space in which we're living, it becomes an air, it interferes with the air ion levels. And if it's a negative charge, then it is believed to have beneficial effects on humans. Okay, so this is I'm reading it because I had to look it up myself. So it's believed to be an enhanced feeling of relaxation, more energy, more, you know, less tiredness, lower stress levels, lower things like irritability, depression, and general levels of tension, right? So that's negatively charged air ions. So that's the good stuff. The bad stuff is that it's possible that those, once it ionizes into the air, that it actually charges it more positively. And therefore, what we get is an overdose of stress response, neurohormone serotonin, and so therefore the stress levels rise. If you've got positively ionized air, then what we're saying is that that's going to add, physiologically, that's going to influence the human immune system. It's going to raise the stress levels. It means that as the stress levels raise, your autoimmune system is lowered. You are more open to infection and to all of the things that can affect you detrimentally. The bottom line on Sally's question, why does water seem to be detrimental, is it's not detrimental per se, is it? I mean, that's where we're going to, just to recap on this again. Water is not detrimental per se. If there's going to be a detrimental effect for somebody, then the crossing point will magnify the detrimental effect. So if you've got a water line that's ambling through and affecting where you sleep, that is not going to be as detrimental for you as if there's another one ambling through and crossing that point, right? And if that crossing point is directly where your head is, for example, then that usually manifests in more acute cases of people being unwell.